welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Downtown Discussions event. It's hosted by the Downtown Long Beach Alliance. And thank you so much to our panelists for agreeing to be with us today and share their knowledge. I'm Samantha Mellinger. I'm the Communications Manager for the Downtown Long Beach Alliance, or DLBA for short. And we're the nonprofit organization overseeing downtown's business improvement districts with the mission to cultivate, preserve, and promote a healthy, safe, and prosperous downtown. So before we get into introductions, just for some background, this event is part of our Downtown Discussions webinar series, which we started during the pandemic as a free educational resource for our community. And it's really designed to connect you with experts about the topics you care about. So for today's virtual roundtable, we're focusing on the digital divide. And if that is a new concept to you, this is a phrase used to reference disparities in internet and technology access among different parts of our community. And during this pandemic, those disparities have really been more apparent than ever. And you will be learning more about that from our panel. So for now, I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Morris Mills, who's our research and policy analyst at the DLBA. And he's going to introduce you to our panel and give you a little background on how you can ask them questions towards the end.
All right. Thanks, Sam, for the introduction. So I guess teeing it off from there, the pandemic, COVID-19, we've really seen an accelerated shift to virtual spaces like this webinar for businesses as well as personal use. And a lot of times these disparities have kind of increased where a lot of people don't have access to reliable high-speed internet or digital technology. And so as Sam said, our mission as a downtown, traditionally while being kind of more focused on downtown physically, we realize now high-speed internet access, digital literacy, this has really quickly become an integral part of our mission. So each of the panelists I'm going to introduce bring a wealth of professional knowledge on this aspect, and I think it's a really good opportunity for the DLBA as well as all of our stakeholders to kind of learn more about this topic. So without further ado, I'll introduce our first panelist, Dr. Gwen Schaefer. She's a faculty member at Cal State Long Beach's Department of Journalism, and she specializes in telecommunications policy as well as broadband access issues. And in addition to this, Gwen serves as a chair of the City of Long Beach's Technology and Innovation Commission, which is involved in a lot of the municipal policymaking activities as it relates to the digital divide. Our next panelist is Stephen Garcia, who is the Senior Manager for Network. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll go back. Gwen, is there anything you wanted to add with the introduction?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay, I'll keep moving. Stephen Garcia, he's the Senior Manager for Network Real Estate at Crown Castle, which is the leading provider of network infrastructure in the country, actually. So Stephen is really instrumental in the planning and the development of next generation high-speed internet and that physical kind of fiber infrastructure that goes along with it. Stephen, thank you for joining us. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you. Appreciate it very much, Morris.
Yeah. Our next panelist is Chris Wacker, and he is president and CEO of Laserfiche, which is a enterprise content management software company that was founded and is currently headquartered here in Long Beach. So Chris is really a thought leader and a visionary kind of in this whole realm of digital spaces. And his input in particular has been really helpful to the city of Long Beach in kind of informing and the direction of these digital inclusion policies. Chris, I really want to thank you for joining us today. Is there anything you'd like to add? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you, Morris, for that introduction. Just to say that we are an international company that has its headquarters in Long Beach, and we would like to do what we can, particularly at this time, to improve the economic health and viability of the city.
Excellent, thank you. Apologies if you hear a siren in the background. Our final panelist is AJ Middleton, who's the Senior Programs Director for Human IT, and he's graciously participated on pretty short notice in place of Gabe. So I really want to thank you for joining us today. Human IT is another Long Beach-based organization, and their whole mission is to provide technology, internet access, and digital training, and really the boots on the ground with bridging the digital divide. So AJ, is there anything else you'd like to add about your position?
No, you covered it, and I'm really excited for this conversation, and thank you for inviting me.
Excellent. And before I introduce our moderator, I'll just go over a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions that come up today, please use the question and answer function in the webinar. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live, feel free to leave a question in the comments below. We'll have an hour for the discussion, and then we'll have 20 minutes at the end for panelists to respond to any questions. As you see a poll pop up, please answer that right now, and I'll put another one up later. But without further ado, I'll introduce the moderator. So Marcel Eppley is the president and CEO of the Long Beach Community Foundation. And her work there in the foundation really covers a pretty wide range of community initiatives for Long Beach. But in particular, she was really instrumental in elevating this entire issue of digital equity and digital access in Long Beach, and really helped to lead the city to form a kind of an inclusion roadmap and handle this issue. So without further ado, yeah, Marcel, thank you for joining us, and let's kick off the discussion.
Thank you, Morris. Thank you, Samantha. Esteemed panelists, it's really an honor to be here and facilitate this conversation that is more relevant than ever. So I'm going to just put a little bit of context to why I'm here and kind of a little bit of the background that Morris alluded to. So in 2016, the Long Beach Community Foundation, in partnership with the Knight Foundation, worked to form the Long Beach Media Collaborative. And we knew that this was important because there are issues in Long Beach that just weren't quite being addressed. And the newspapers were doing excellent work, but working together, they could really get at those important issues to educate the community. And as a community foundation, part of our role as grant makers, as conveners, is also to make sure that the community is knowledgeable about issues so that they can get involved. And it was incredible work this group did. It took a while to ramp up, and in 2017, the Long Beach Media Collaborative did this series on strengthening the signal, directly addressing the digital divide. So this was some time ago, but what came out of that was a big sort of blitz in Long Beach to really educate people in depth on what's the impact of not having high-speed internet? What's the impact of not having access? Because at the time, the statistic was that 17% of households did not have access to the internet. There's a lot of engagement with the community. People got involved. They started listening. They started really paying attention to this issue, talking about civic engagement. What does that mean? You know, what are the disparities there? And most notably, it was the city council and our very own mayor who said, this is a very important issue and we're going to prioritize it. So that was wonderful to hear our mayor and council really putting some gas on that and to directly address. So I'm going to get out of that and really kind of start. There's really great questions here, and if we didn't say so already, please do as we go along, put your questions in the Q&A. And use that feature, because I would love to go in after this and really have a dialogue with the folks who are on here, which I believe are mostly nonprofits and community-based organizations, which is great. We definitely want to hear from you. So for starters, I'm going to ask this of Gwen, because she works as the chair of the Long Beach Technology and Innovation Commission, and her research and her breadth of knowledge in this subject is outstanding. So Gwen, can you help the audience and help the community understand, what does the digital divide look like really on the local level? Because this is a national, regional issue, but what about the local level, and what districts and block groups specifically in Long Beach are impacted?
Sure. So I don't know if I can get to that granular level, but I'm going to share with you some slides. And these are excerpts from a report that the Technology and Innovation Commission released in January of 2019. So it's pre-COVID. But just as Marcel mentioned about the mayor and city council really being galvanized by the Strengthening the Signal series to address the digital divide in Long Beach, the mayor, soon after that series of articles came out, the mayor came to the commission and asked us to do a comprehensive study of exactly what's happening with digital inclusion in the city, who's online, who isn't, how are people connecting, if they don't have a home broadband connection. There were a whole series of questions that we asked in a survey that was disseminated pretty much during the entire summer and fall of 2018. And then we also held a series of community conversations with targeted demographics. So Long Beach's sizable Latinx communities, our Cambodian community, older residents. We also met with a group of Long Beach residents who are living in transition, who none of them had home broadband. So talking to them about how they would use it if they actually had access. So the statistics I'm going to share with you now are, again, pre-COVID. And I know things have changed. When we get to the city's response to the pandemic, you're going to be totally amazed at some of the amazing program Long Beach is facilitating to help get our residents online. But here's what we found out in 2018. At that time, of the 1,000 or so residents who responded to our survey, 28% of them reported that they did not have a home broadband connection. Many of them relied on their phones for connectivity, but we're not counting that as home broadband for obvious reasons. Just the functionality of using your phone is not the equivalent of a PC. Communities of color, based on the responses, lacked home internet at twice the rates of white communities. So about 11% of Latinx and African-American and Asian Pacific Islander residents who responded to our survey said that they were offline, compared to 5% of the white residents who responded. Not surprisingly, income is the primary determinant of whether a city resident, or even nationally, whether somebody has home broadband. So about 40% of residents who reported not having a connection at home reported a household income of $20,000 a year or less. And about 12% of older adults and youth lacked home internet access. So we see there's, and also I think with the youth, it has changed a lot because of remote learning. The school district and the city has done a lot. They've both done a lot to get kids online. But a year and a half ago or so, that's what we learned. Okay, wait, we already covered that one, so I'll skip that. Some other reasons beyond income, why people said they were not subscribing to internet. I mean, you can see in the pie chart that affordability was the primary reason, but we also heard from a lot of residents who said they couldn't afford a device. So when we think about being connected, it's not just internet access, it's also having a computer or a tablet that's going to allow you to accomplish the things online you need to do. We saw literacy, like a digital literacy gap. A lot of people said, I'd like to use it, but I don't know how. I don't know how to get online, or I don't know how to troubleshoot if I have a problem once I'm online. I had mentioned that many residents said they just rely on their phone. So that was another explanation people gave for not subscribing. And then you see a series of other things. To subscribe to most ISPs, you need a good credit history. Some people said they were either unbanked or they had bad credit, so they couldn't get a subscription. Some people didn't want it. They said, I don't need it. And then there were some privacy concerns. And when we asked, I think this one is really interesting now, and maybe we can talk about this later with the libraries closed since March. I really wonder how this is impacting people, because when we asked folks who lacked a home broadband connection how they get online, you can see most people said they use the public libraries to access the internet. And that has not been an option for about 10 months now. And when we asked people, if you were able to subscribe to home broadband, how would you use it? The vast majority of respondents, so we can see 65%, said that they wished they had internet for school and work purposes. And, well, I'm sorry, that was for school and education. Going down to work was about 55%. And then we had large percentage of city residents saying that they would like to have home broadband so they could take more advantage of city services, including paying bills online, which again is even more imperative now with City Hall closed, and some of that, face-to-face bill paying not even possible. Okay. So that's sort of a snapshot of some of the things going on over here. I'm going to stop my,
That's
and
great.
then I guess the last thing I would say, that one just real quick thing that came out of our community conversations that's not on the slides, that was a theme, where residents really reinforced the idea that they did not see broadband as a luxury, that it really was an imperative to be able to participate in society.
For sure. Thank you, Gwen. That's having that data is really important, and also just trying to understand, how big of an issue this is. And clearly affordability is at the forefront of why people are not able to get access to the internet and get the tools that they need to be successful. So we know that Human IT, amazing work in the community. You're out there on the front lines, you're handing out Chromebooks, you're giving Wi-Fi devices, you're doing all of this work, and as a nonprofit, so you accept donations that fuel the need to fulfill that gap. So AJ, could you just briefly kind of give us a synopsis of what that, the device affordability, like how are you filling that gap right now?
Definitely, and I'll start out and say a lot of what Gwen just went over with her research really shapes the work that we do on a daily basis. So it was really great to see that research being conducted, and the city putting a lot of effort into getting that data there. As far as the affordability aspect of it, every day, as you mentioned, we're on the front lines. We're communicating with individuals, families, households, one, to get them connected to various different low-cost internet offers. So we help them walk them through the process through all of these different offers that are out there, whether it's Frontier, it's Spectrum, AT&T, a mobile hotspot, specifically at their low cost rate. So anywhere from $10 to $25 a month. And we walk them through that entire process to make sure that they're qualified and ensure that it actually is a good fit for them. On the device front, we have a couple different programs that we run. So one, there is one that actually comes with a free device after we assist people in getting connected. So, we like to, remove that barrier of cost as much as possible. So our free device program is great. If for whatever any reason anyone doesn't go through that free device program, doesn't want to sign up for an internet connection, that specific issue of affordability is exactly why we launched a low cost technology store, where we could remove as much of the barrier of cost as we possibly could. So instead of telling someone, unfortunately go buy a $1,000 computer, it's something we could potentially provide at $100. That comes with free tech support, free warranty, customizable options. And really those donations that you refer to really helps us fuel that, really helps us, take away that cost, whether it's technology donations that we can refurbish, it's monetary donations to help us wipe as much of that cost as possible. We really want to, provide the community access to not only an internet connection at a low cost, but then also the device at really as low a cost as we possibly can.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Gwen, too, what you said, and thank you, AJ, for that in-depth knowledge. That the conversations that we're having with residents that need this technology, it's not a luxury anymore. In order to apply for jobs, in order now to participate in school and scholastics, you have to have these devices, and learning from a cell phone is not sufficient. It's not as effective. So kind of thinking about, how we've migrated to work from home, to learn from home. AJ, could you give us a little more insight on how communities are being affected by the digital divide? How are they coping? What kind of assistance are they getting? Maybe you have some numbers for us. Maybe just elaborate a little bit more in detail.
Sure. So with everything going to whether that's work from home, school from home, it really kind of put the digital divide really into the forefront, showing that people really didn't have access at home. Schools had to go fully remote, and and a lot of their students couldn't do that. So that means either one, finding a device, or not attending school. Same with work. There's been great programs that we've been lucky enough to be a part of as well, whether it was assistance from the school district, or it was, assistance from a foundation, their business, anything like that, has been really, really key. But the quick turnaround has kind of really been a real detriment to a lot of people. There was, months of school missed, work. Some people now can't work at from home. It's just not, possible. So, I mean, as far as specific numbers, we've seen it be pushed really, really to the forefront. Went from about having 1,500 people reach out to us a month to receive assistance to that quickly became 7,500, 8,000 people. There was a very, very quick transition of people reaching out. We quickly had to transition, and we were able to distribute about 50,000 devices this year, which in previous years, that was 6,000, 7,000 was kind of where we were at. So there's been a real increase in the need. And we've been lucky enough to work with some great programs to help fill that need, but it really is a group effort that we need to continue to fill because it is by no means solved at this point.
Thank you. And Gwen, is that anything that you're seeing as well, kind of in your research and community conversations?
Well, I mean, since the pandemic, the commission has shifted our focus has been different the last year or so. We've been doing data privacy research with the city's technology department. But I mean, I can actually talk about this a little bit more anecdotally as a professor. I mean, even my students at Cal State Long Beach, I see some of them struggle with access to technology, despite the incredible programs like AJ helps facilitate with Human IT and through the university. There are still just some barriers to access. And last semester, it wouldn't be that unusual where I'd have students, put into the chat, my camera is going to be off today because my laptop isn't working, and I'm just calling in, or or my mic's not working. So I mean, even at that level, and I have a fourth grader, so I walk in his room and I eavesdrop on his homeschooling, and I see how much time his teacher spends trying to help students navigate the technology. So I think even when you have access in these times, there are still some obstacles to making it work.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you for that. There's quite a bit of activity happening around this issue, and a lot of groups are working to bridge the digital divide to address this, especially during the pandemic. And Stephen Garcia, he's from Crown Castle, and they're doing some amazing work even before the pandemic, but now have really put some more gas on their efforts, and they're a bit back more in the supply chain. Stephen, could you kind of give a layman's term, definition of what Crown Castle does, and kind of talk about some of those projects and initiatives to provide solutions?
Sure. Thank you very much. Again, Stephen Garcia with Crown Castle. I'm the permitting government affairs manager for Southern California area. It goes back to 2007 when we first made our initial investment in the small cell broadband network development, but our most recent foray into the new, more modern look at small cells started in 2017, around the same time that you were looking at some of those statistics from home broadband usage increases. One of our projects today that's increased exponentially since the pandemic, but even before, has been for a citywide network that we're developing, focused primarily in Central, North, and West Long Beach, serving the areas that were identified in the digital inclusion plan as areas of underserved areas. So we think it's nice to know that there's a parallel support effort going on at the level of devices, but more importantly, at the level of the infrastructure and broadband networks that are needed to support that demand. So we currently have just recently turned up 50 sites in Long Beach area this past December, and we have another 100 to go in our current plan for 2021. We expect, given the work from home and remote learning pressures on networks, that we're going to see a lot more in 2021, besides what we already have in the queue. So, yeah.
And do you anticipate everything kind of continuing through 2021? Like, not everybody, once things do get better, people are still going to be using the internet, and maybe exponentially more. Are you anticipating more demand?
Yeah, we expect the trends that we saw before the pandemic and now accelerated during the pandemic to continue, because I think most areas of or employers are seeing the opportunities and benefits of allowing their employees to work from home. The remote learning may be not as successful, but I think it can be supported better with the network improvements that we're trying to make to support Long Beach residents.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I know, Gwen, in your work, you've got quite a few projects, and as well as AJ. Gwen, could you kind of fill us in on what you're working on now and maybe what's coming down the pike?
Oh yeah, well, I was going to mention some of the programs that the city of Long Beach has been facilitating since the start of the pandemic, and I am tangentially involved in some of these because I serve on the city's COVID-19 broadband response task force, and also the broadband stakeholder roundtable stakeholder group. But this list was actually compiled by Rebecca Kauma, who has done an amazing job. She is the city's digital inclusion manager. So some of the highlights that she had asked me to mention. And I should also say that these programs were primarily funded through CARES federal dollars. So the city of Long Beach received about $40 million in CARES funds. And then in turn, $1 million of that was allocated for digital inclusion initiatives. And the money had to be spent, or at least allocated, by the end of 2020. So the city has been partnering with nonprofits and corporate partners as well to make some of these initiatives happen. And obviously Human IT has been integral to the efforts as well. So one thing the city set up was a digital inclusion resources hotline where folks can call in and find out where can they get connected to a device or subsidized internet access. So far, the city's received about 700 calls from residents who are looking for resources. The city also is running a digital inclusion community outreach program, and that's partnering with 9 community-based organizations that have implemented some outreach programs, some in person, some online. So they've done some canvassing, pop-ups, different ways trying to make sure folks who need resources are aware of what's available. The city is giving out free internet connections. So I think it's for a year. And AJ, you probably know a lot more about this than I do. And then also devices. And I think Rebecca said as of a couple of days ago, about 1,600 residents had participated in that particular initiative. There's also, I won't go into everything because I don't want to dominate the time, but there's also programs that are available in multiple languages. Because that is also, we talked about income as a deterrent or a barrier to access, but language is also a really big barrier. So we've got some multilingual resource guides available. And the city also, this isn't so much a standalone program, but the city has set up a website called Connected LB, and it's a platform that centralizes all of the resources that are available. So sort of creates this one-stop shopping, so people are not floundering and get sent, go to one website and get sent to a different one. So that's available.
I was going to ask for you to mention that website. So is it connectlb.com?
It's Connected LB.
Connectedlb.com. Thank you. And AJ, are there other resources that you're aware of that where people can go to get assistance?
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, Human IT, we're on the front line. So, community members can definitely reach out to us directly to receive assistance, whether that's in getting connected to a low-cost internet offer, that's a free or low-cost device, or even digital literacy training as well. We've been lucky enough to partner with the city on almost all of the initiatives that Gwen just mentioned. So there's quite a few different ways to you can call us directly. We have a texting line that's 562-372-6925, or people can go to our website, fill out a quick application, or even if they call into the resource hotline or go to the Connected LB platform, there's a chance they could get referred to us to receive the assistance. So we're more than happy, we were more than happy to partner with the city on all those initiatives, and really being able to continue to support the Long Beach community.
And AJ, what is your website?
Humanit.org. Human-i-t.org.
Okay, some dashes in there. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And Gwen, for different languages, if I were to go to connectedlb.com, will I find what languages will I find there? Do you know offhand? I know the English, Spanish, Khmer. I think. Okay. Probably.
But I'm guessing that multilingual resource guide is posted on that website. I can't say for sure, but I can find out afterwards, and Mo and you guys can send it out, or Samantha can send out the information if you want to.
Thank you. Yeah, that's terrific. And there's a lot of other groups that are also meeting to really try to address this issue, less on the short term, more on the long term, and really doing some experimental, some pilots, some really great different ways that we can bridge that divide, that we can get people access in a completely different way that isn't as practiced even in the United States, and really really innovative thinking. And Chris Wacker from Laserfiche is really driven that. He's extremely passionate about this issue. I've sat in meetings with him on this, and I would love, Chris, for you to share, what Laserfiche, yourself with your own passions, what are some of the opportunities that people might have to look forward to with the work you're doing?
Well, yeah, thank you, Marcel. I'd like to start by saying that the trajectory for the U.S. economy is really into the information economy. That is going to be the driver of our wealth. You look at the massive fortunes that have been amassed, that of Amazon, Facebook, Google, to some extent Tesla, because that's technology on wheels. They all come from this sector. And the beauty of it is that it's open to everybody. The titans of this industry, being Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, none of them were college graduates. They're all college dropouts. So there are no barriers to entry, no pedigrees or certificates that you need to get into it. Really, all that you need is an interest and access to it. And I think this discussion is focused on the heightened need of the people on the other side of the digital divide to get involved in it, because they don't have physical opportunities to participate or communicate or learn at this time. So really, by extending or by attempting to by closing the digital divide, because it's going to happen, we are throwing a lifeline to these people. And we hope that they will take advantage of it. I'm sure that they will. The biblical expression, bread cast upon the water, it will resonate with a large number of them. And it's hoped that they will participate in it and become, truly productive members of society. It's up to us, to this group and others, civic leaders, corporate leaders, elected officials, to make that available. I think of the an analogy, a corollary, going back to the 1870s in this country. It was expanding westward, and there was great opportunity for the railroad companies, and there were many of them, but none of them were making money. So it was, J.P. Morgan, what he did was to organize them, and they all became profitable, and the country developed. This is our opportunity to expand the participation in the economy to those that have been locked out, or just not access, had no access to the information economy. Well, since its inception, and moving forward, that's our opportunity now.
Right. So, Chris, thinking about life without the internet, thinking about really having lack of access, and how people live day to day, especially these days. How does that? What is it? What opportunities are missed, and specifically with low, does it affect disproportionately low income communities? I mean, I kind of know the answer to that, but could you elaborate a little bit of that in your experience?
Well, sure. There's just tremendous opportunity for everybody. You can, make a decent start and a decent living from reselling items on eBay, and that, from that you get dignity and encouragement to continue to explore the internet, and to, all of the self-help videos and instructional on YouTube, and instructions available like from Khan University or Coursera on artificial intelligence and machine learning. That's wide open and available to everybody. So they just get a little bit of a start, and then they realize, the tremendous wealth of information out there, to better yourselves, and also to make money, to participate. And that would be the start of participation in the information economy.
Mhm.
It's so important today, and it's really like, it is the future, and you need, the barriers to entry are so low. If traditionally, if you wanted to go into retail, you needed to set up a brick and mortar operation. Now you can set up a virtual operation, with very little investment. And as I say, it's open to everybody. All that you need is a little imagination, a dream, and you can really, the sky's the limit. Because in our society today, the routine tasks are being automated. They are being programmed. Even the extreme example is self-driving cars. Can you, that they are reliant on artificial intelligence. And if you download an app or register for an app, you get a series of pictures with a question: where are the stoplights, or where are the bridges? And then you have to select the different pictures that answer the question. And that's not just to prove you're a human being, you're a live person. They are doing things with that data. They are using that for programming the artificial intelligence in autonomous vehicles. So it is being spread from the very manual tasks up to the most sophisticated online data collection for internet commerce. They're able to follow you and offer you things that you might be interested in buying. So really, it impacts the entire society from very manual up to very complicated and sophisticated tasks. And as I say, over and over, that it is open to everybody, and everyone should participate in it, really. Because the other things are just so much harder to get into. You need training, or you need a massive investment. But this, all you need is access, PC and broadband internet access.
Well, that's just it, Chris, right? I mean, the access is what's stopping people, and it's
Yes.
primarily financial, and it's disproportionately affecting low income. So if you've talked about technology and advancing and the masses, and I know that this is a downtown Long Beach, panel and kind of a focus, and we're gonna focus in on downtown Long Beach in a moment, but I want to open it up to the panel, the full panel at this moment, and anybody who, from your experience, your research, your direct one-on-one contact with folks, and kind of what you're seeing out in the field, thinking about low-income communities throughout Long Beach. What are some of the, what opportunities are we missing? How far behind will people fall, and how will that affect the disparities that would anticipate growing? So Can anybody kind of touch on that a little bit?
I would just mention that if you're excluded, if you don't have broadband access, you're incredibly marginalized in our society. And it goes beyond just economic opportunities that Chris was mentioning. It's access to healthcare, it's access to education, it's access to government services. So, I mean, all of these areas where we see inequities already, all of these inequities are compounded when you do not have access to the internet. So it's not just a lack of access problem. It's like you said, it's also a poverty problem. And, with the wealth gap, which I would argue is probably one of the biggest challenges of our time, we are going to have, some segment of our population that does have access to all this information and services. And then at the opposite end of the spectrum, folks who are offline for whatever reason the barriers are, whether it's digital literacy or connectivity, and those inequities that they experience are just going to be compounded.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to add a website that came up in addition to connectedlb.com. There is another platform I think is in partnership with Connected LB, and that's Everyone On. And that website is Everyone On, all one word, everyoneon.org/Long Beach, everyoneon.org/Long Beach. And that's another resource. At the moment, I believe Spanish is up on there. So if folks want to go and visit that, that would be a good, English and Spanish, excuse me, are both up there. And I think more languages to come. So I want to mention that. Thank you. We're more than halfway through, and I'm going to stop at about 10 after 11, if not sooner, to answer some of the questions, because there are folks watching on Facebook Live, and there are people that are participating, and there are some questions coming in. So we'll address those as we get towards the end. Shifting to kind of more, I guess it would be time for us to look at downtown a little bit closer, because I had a question here regarding long-term opportunities and incentive solutions. And it seems like we've answered most of those, but I want to go back to Stephen Garcia from Crown Castle on this one, just to elaborate, because your approach is long-term. You're not providing immediate, but you're more in the background, facilitating the structure and the ability to have these tools to begin with. So has Crown Castle, have you in your work identified any long-term opportunities as a result of some of the initiatives and solutions being implemented?
Yeah, after our initial pilot for the modern day small cell back in 2017, that prompted the city of Long Beach to adopt a new right-of-way wireless ordinance, and that kind of identified and streamlined some of the standards that they preferred to see in downtown Long Beach and elsewhere. So working in collaboration with downtown Long Beach, or excuse me, the city of Long Beach, we're able to identify and put together processes that would help facilitate the permits needed for our underground fiber construction, as well as small cells. And without that sort of kind of educational process and collaboration with the city, it wouldn't be possible to build the networks that we're trying to do today, or as fast as we need to. And I would say since 2018, the City of Long Beach and Crown Castle have worked probably 18 months here, continuing to refine the process. And because of that process, we're seeing a faster deployment. As I mentioned back in December, 45 sites were turned up. And because of that, additional miles of fiber were installed in City of Long Beach. We just installed 16 miles this past quarter in downtown Long Beach area. And that will continue to grow. So the footprint that we're building is going to support the residents throughout Long Beach, and that's really necessary. So besides identifying what areas need the service and the devices that they need to access the networks, they need the infrastructure to make those things work. So all those mobile devices that we have that are free or handed out at low cost, they need to work. And so with the infrastructure that we're building, thankfully with cooperation with Long Beach Public Works, we're going to be able to make that happen sooner than later. So.
Yeah, and for the audience that's here today, we're not familiar with a lot of the infrastructure and the materials needed to provide this. It's extensive what you've got to do, and also sort of the hoops you have to jump through, and the permissions and the construction and all of that. And you use the term small cells and fiber. Can you help the audience who is not in that industry understand what is a small cell and what do you mean by fiber?
Yeah, so small cells were kind of the next step for carriers to deploy ubiquitous service throughout communities. Right now, most people are familiar with towers. Those towers have limited capacity, but with the introduction of small cells, we're able to infill areas that are seeing peak demand areas or peak demand. And so by filling in the areas between the towers with small cells, those are able to absorb the increased demand that we're seeing, especially now with COVID-19 affecting the work from home and remote learning. There's been a tremendous pressure on the networks. So the only way you can alleviate that is to introduce small cells. A small cell would basically be an attachment to a streetlight or a wood pole or on utility lines that anywhere where there's need and demand, that's where we're deploying our new network support. The fiber is connecting those small cells and towers back to a switch, and that is how you make a call. So you make a call or open up a app, and that connects to the network, and then the network goes to a switch, and then goes out to the person you're calling or the access of the web that the website you're trying to reach, and then back to you. So the more network we have, the faster service you'll get. And so eventually you'll see those increased speeds that everyone's promising, but you really need that groundwork or that foundation of that infrastructure that we're building now since 2007 to continue to grow in order to accelerate the access and to make it universal as far as the experience that you have, no matter what part of Long Beach you're in. So.
Thank you, Stephen. Crown Castle is working through a lot of those challenges on behalf of everybody in Long Beach and beyond. So thank you for everything that you're doing. I know that AJ also, in terms of things that are being implemented and thinking about specifically things that you're doing now. You're doing things in large volume, AJ, and you're rapidly deploying resources. What do you think are some of the things that you've learned, the solutions that you've provided that might stick and actually continue after sort of the pandemic is over?
Great question. So, as you mentioned, we're deploying devices very rapidly. We're assisting people in getting connected. Some things that we've seen that probably will stick will, being the conversation and the support that the digital divide is getting because it's been pushed in the forefront is probably something that we're seeing is going to be, what we're hoping is going to be something in the long term, to where discussions like this that are, specifically calling out the digital divide, or organizations, really putting support into helping their communities that we can work with, to supply these devices, something that, we're seeing that should stick going forward. And one thing that we always kind of think about here in Human IT, thinking of long-term approaches to the digital divide, is if we were to snap our fingers and say everyone gets a device and internet connection, that doesn't necessarily mean the digital divide is solved. It just kind of changes. Technology is changing so rapidly, so we have to stay, forward thinking on what is really coming next with this digital divide. Is it training? So now everyone has a device. We have to ensure that everyone knows how to use it. Because as I was mentioned before, it really is a tool for opportunity. We want to ensure that everyone has that. So continue to be forward thinking on what could potentially change with the digital divide as more and more devices get distributed, as the infrastructure continues to be better supported. How do we continue to support individuals into the future as that technology changes?
Yeah, that's great. I want to move to downtown and call on Morris rather in just a moment, but there's one group that we have not talked about on this panel, and that's the internet service providers. It's who, as consumers, we're paying our bill to. It's literally the people that are giving access. And I'm not as aware, and I don't know that if the people that are listening today are aware of any power authority that they have to be part of the solution, but certainly if any of you are aware of whether they can have a seat at the table or not, I'd love to hear from anybody who might be in the know on that.
I can speak to that. So the internet service providers all have discounted broadband plans available. And so they range from $10 a month to, I think, 19 is the most expensive. And off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly. I know in Long Beach, obviously, we have Frontier and we have Spectrum. And I do have information on their programs specifically, but I don't have it memorized. But basically, to qualify, you have to have a child who participates in or at least is eligible for the free lunch program at school. I think in California, older residents are also eligible to take advantage of the discounted broadband plans. There are a few other criteria. Often there are some barriers though as well. So sometimes if you were a previous subscriber of one of those ISPs and you owed the company money, you are not eligible to, even if it was years ago, you might not be eligible for those programs. Sometimes you do need, I think we had mentioned earlier that you have to have a credit history or good credit to participate. So the programs are excellent if you qualify and if you know about them. So I know in my class, I bring it up, and often students will tell me they had no idea. Oh, so I know, I think it is Frontier and Spectrum. If you're a community college student, you also are eligible for the discounted plans. And a lot of our students are transfers, and they said they had no idea that these things exist. So another one of the issues is that the companies don't do a great job of marketing them, and that might be by design as well. And I would argue that we really should not depend on corporate players to solve the digital divide. I mean, they offer these programs at will. They can revoke them at any time. They set the terms of them. And I really think that it's awesome that they can complement what's happening in the public sector and in the nonprofit sector. But I would say from a public policy perspective, we should not necessarily be looking to the ISPs to solve the challenges that we face.
That makes a lot of sense, Gwen.
Marcel,
answer that?
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a CalNet website. It's part of the California Department of Technology that has a webpage that identifies the discounted plans that the carriers are providing and the ISPs. So yeah, I can share that information with you later, but I just want to make you aware that cdt.ca.gov kind of takes you to a webpage that identifies the discounted plans that they have or currently have. So it's a good resource to take a look at, so that if there are opportunities for people to access it, they know which carriers already provide it, and hopefully they line up with the service providers in Long Beach.
Thank you. And there's been quite a few websites and resources put out here. My understanding is the DLBA is going to share that with the folks that have logged in today. So, and it's interesting. I hope everybody here is learning, because about 84% of participants so far have let us know in the poll that they've known some or little knowledge about this topic. So that's great feedback for us, and a great topic and a great discussion to be had. There's definitely a digital divide impact in urban environments, specifically in downtown. And I think it'd be beneficial to know what role is there for organizations like the Downtown Long Beach Associates, which is a nonprofit specifically covering that area, to address this issue.
You know what, Marcel, excuse me just a second. Before we move on to that, I would like to suggest that we not rule out private sector participation in the funding of this completely. You know, I noticed yesterday that Elon Musk had become the richest man in the world with $185 billion. That is a lot of money. And what we're talking about here is, you know, like $25 to $50 million. There are other ones besides him, you know, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, or Bill Gates of Microsoft. You know, those people, that he in particular, he contributes to and organizes many programs for the development of or the improvement of Africa. Why not start at home? You know, why not reach out to these people? You know, they're the ones that have benefited from the information economy, and it could be expressed to them in terms that they would be investing in future markets for their companies. It's not strictly a philanthropic effort. You know, it's well, I think that they should be approached. Really,
that's a great interjection, Chris. Thank you for mentioning that, because there is a space for philanthropy in what some might see as a basic need that needs to be filled, in addition to housing and in addition to food, shelter, and education, and all those things in healthcare. Internet access could absolutely be supported by businesses that are moving into Long Beach, that are businesses that have employees in Long Beach, that businesses that are doing well and want to make an impact and want to contribute to a solution. So I'm glad you put that out there, and there will be opportunities in the future for that. Looking at specifically downtown, Morris, could you kind of guide us on what what's going on and what opportunities there are?
Yeah. So the Downtown Long Beach Alliance, we're a business improvement district. So we're a nonprofit, and we manage essentially, I guess you could think of it as a mini city in downtown Long Beach. And there's a lot of similar organizations around the country that do this for similar kind of dense urban areas. But as I said in the introduction, a lot of it has been really focused on the physical aspect. So whether that's something about retail spaces in a storefront, or items related to housing, or city infrastructure, it's all kind of in the physical space. And so with COVID-19, we're kind of seeing our role switch more into the virtual realm, and still kind of trying to retain that community, but in the virtual realm is something that we're figuring it out as we go along in terms of where we fit in. But I think as an organization that is not inherently tech-based, it's not an internet service provider, it's not specifically, its mission is not oriented towards that realm. I really think the greatest power comes from capacity building. So we already serve kind of as an ombudsman and kind of a network builder between residents and business owners who are looking to connect to more resources. And that would be traditionally something, like permitting or help with a business plan, or looking for a space to set up shop. But now I think we're trying to introduce that more in the virtual space, and connect people to organizations like Human IT, or leveraging the network that we have in the relationship with Laserfish, or the city's economic development department, and kind of acting as that middleman. So it can be kind of daunting. This tech space is very specialized, but I think organizations like ourselves and other kind of place-based network organizations really can act as that middleman who has knowledge of all of these websites, the links. They know if Human IT is accepting donations for hardware, or if someone needs help learning how to set up something like that, connecting them to these services. So yeah, kind of acting to strengthen that network, but moving into the virtual space. I think that's the single most important role that we can take, and a lot of other organizations that are kind of burgeoning into this space as well. It's a really good place to start.
Yeah, I want to stick with you, Morris, excuse me, for a second, because we've got quite a few questions that come in, and I want to ask that first question and kind of move over into the Q&A portion. And your DLBA has been around for a very long time. You are not the city of Long Beach, but there is a question, and I know that this discussion has come up a lot, and I don't know if you have any insight on this, but the idea of free public wireless internet and having hotspots covering key neighborhoods like downtown. I'm thinking, I've worked in downtown for the past on and off 20 years, and seen it grow and flourish, and all of these great new businesses coming in, and clearly a lot of things have come to a stop or slow down for sure. But when things open back up, and when that happens, the idea of free wireless internet with more people in downtown makes a lot of sense. Of course, it takes a lot of resources and structure and things like that. But is the DLBA involved with pursuing that?
So before the pandemic, we were sitting on kind of a roundtable along with Human IT, Crown Castle as well, Cal State, And again, that was our role as a capacity building organization. And I believe, Gwen, you can correct me, part of the digital inclusion roadmap that the city had created kind of, it mentions this kind of public or free Wi-Fi as kind of one of the goals.
Yes, and there is no citywide network, but the city does have hotspots and, like outside municipal buildings and other sort of touristy areas.
But okay, yeah, so that I think that's something down the road that we hadn't previously considered is something that people are going to be looking for when they want to visit or they start up a business or possibly move to downtown, incorporating that. And so again, that's not something that we have the physical capacity to do, but to be able to kind of put the information out there, whether it's with safety ambassadors, the guides that are on the ground, or including it in market reports that we release, or offering services to residents and things like that. It hasn't materialized yet, but I think again, a dense urban environment, everything is already very physically connected. Moving into the next generation, into that digital space, having connection via Wi-Fi anywhere you go is kind of the next logical step.
So actually, if I could just, I think maybe you were asking me about this and I didn't realize it. So the city actually had consultants do a broadband plan a couple years ago. I think it was called the Broadband Group, and I'm sure the consultants plan is available if somebody wanted to check it out. But they looked at 3 scenarios, and one of them was phase 1 was connecting all municipal buildings, which the city decided to go with. And that might be what Stephen was referring to with the fiber build out. So that's fiber connectivity, not wireless. And then the second scenario was looking at connecting not to the last mile, but having fiber within a mile, I think, of all residential and commercial buildings in the city. And then the third scenario, which they determined was cost prohibitive, was to do a fiber network citywide. So that would it wouldn't in itself compete with the ISPs. The city would own all of the fiber, but then they could lease it to companies that either were businesses who wanted their own networks, or if there was a competitive ISP that wanted to come into the city and offer residential or commercial services. So the city was really looking at fiber versus wireless.
So that's a great segue into the next question. And I know, Stephen, that you're well aware of this type of issue, and I would like to call on you to add to that. But there is a question that came in related just to what Gwen said, in thinking about injecting yourself at Crown Castle into the pipeline of services. We have our primary internet servicers, Spectrum and Frontier. Is Crown Castle at all interested in the internet service provider offering in Long Beach?
Well, it's something we're certainly exploring. One of the bridges between what we do now and what we may be doing is CBRS, Citizen Broadband Radio Service. That's currently being used by school districts. So we're just building a network for Fontana Unified School District, and it's an exclusive LTE network that serves students in Fontana. I think that's a great opportunity that could be used also commercially for Downtown Business Association or smaller areas like that. The network can't be as large as we end up deciding makes sense, but it can be customized for a smaller launch, like a pilot, and then grow into something much bigger. But it's something that wasn't available just a couple of years ago, but we're deploying our first CBRS system in Fontana and should have that completed by next year. So
that's great. Was there something you wanted to add to the last question as well?
Yeah, it was kind of just taking it off from the downtown, focus. CBRS is the opportunity where you could actually have something better than just Wi-Fi. LTE service level capabilities from CBRS could be something that maybe the city of Long Beach and or cooperation with private businesses in downtown Long Beach could all participate and support. We could build that kind of network based on the backbone that we already have in Long Beach. So it's something to think about.
Could you please define CBRS, the acronym?
Yeah, it's Citizen Broadband Radio Service, and it's right now being centered or focused on healthcare and school districts, but it can be used for commercial types of deployments as well.
That's the Fontana pilot you talked
Yeah,
about, and
exactly.
and maybe in the future bringing some of that to Long Beach to see kind of.
It's something to think about, because I think
Yeah.
Wi-Fi is kind of a universal term, but it's more than Wi-Fi. It's better, and it's a private network. So,
Stephen, what is the bandwidth of that?
you know, it really depends on how much we want to put into it. But right now, the basis for our Fontana network is LTE level service. So it can
And
go
LTE is your basic
long-term
speed.
evolution. It's like 4G.
Mhm.
So yeah, it can be incrementally increased in service levels as the carriers or as 5G becomes available. It can be something that you could include in that network.
Well, talking about 5G, Marty, excuse me, Stephen, Marty is the person asking the question. Stephen, thinking about the basic speed. So there's fast internet and there's basic internet. Is the infrastructure that you are putting in place now with the small cells, the 5G, is that infrastructure in place for your basic 5G speeds, or is it going to be the higher internet speeds, or is it going to be both maybe?
Yeah, it'll be both. I mean, the backbone that we're building today is 4G LTE level. The next step by the carriers will be to introduce 5G. That's not currently available, but it will be. But without the backbone of fiber that we have and the small cells that we're replacing throughout the city of Long Beach, that's what you need to launch to the next level of service, which would be 5G. So.
Okay. And while I've got you in the hot seat, Stephen, there's a broadband bill that Lena Gonzalez has put forth, Senator Lena Gonzalez. Are you aware of the provisions in there and kind of what we're pursuing?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, it was known as AB 57, Assembly Bill 57 in the state of California. It was kind of a parallel effort by the state of California to go to accelerate the deployment of broadband throughout California. So it's the next generation of that bill, which failed. But there is some hope that that could happen. I think City of Long Beach is a good example of a city that's already taking forward steps to kind of remove the barriers to entry, lower the cost, and accelerate the deployment to areas in need as well as the rest of the city.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. This next question is a tough one. And we all know I just realized my mic is off to the side, so you can probably hear me better now. The issue of homelessness in Long Beach. And it's not for this panel to comment on homelessness and the issue and downtown Long Beach and folks suffering from homelessness. But there is a question, for people experiencing homelessness, how do they, how do they get, they're working on their own, life and obstacles there. But for those folks, I mean, is there any opportunities that anyone on this panel knows? I know some nonprofits, so I can speak to it a little bit, but are there any of you that know of programs available for people experiencing homelessness to get access to the internet and support them?
Well, I think that's a role the libraries were playing predominantly prior to the pandemic. I mean, I know when I would go downtown and use the main library, there were many homeless folks in there on the computers, and even at my neighborhood branch. So, and I mean, and some homeless people do have cell phones. That's actually not usual.
Yeah, and I know that to be true as well. One group, it's Mental Health of America of Los Angeles, and they're in Long Beach, and they work with folks suffering from homelessness. And I know they have a wellness center over on, I believe it's Pacific Avenue. It might be Long Beach Boulevard, so forgive me if I'm getting the address wrong. But it's a beautiful bright blue building, and they absolutely help people that are coming off the street, that are looking to make their lives better and working at it. And they have a whole computer lab and people there to help them. And I think that resource, since the libraries are closed, might be another opportunity to help them. So that's the Wellness Center with them. They're also known as MHA, Mental Health of America. So that's one of the questions that we got.
Yeah, we also work with Mental Health of America as well. And when their community is ready, we tend to also supply some mobile hotspots, which tend to be a good fit, as well as the devices that we offer at a low cost. So they do refer some of their residents or one of their community over to us to receive some of those resources as well.
Thank you. We have about 17 minutes left here before we kind of do the final closing. And so there's a great question on here. I really like this question asked from our attendees, one of the attendees. And I'm just going to read it. It reads, in a perfect world, and this is for the whole panel to think about, in a perfect world, how would you solve the digital divide? And I know it's hard to open that up to everybody, and there's, you know, awkward silence, but I'm gonna pick on Chris Wacker because he is a visionary and a dreamer, and I would love if I could pick on you first and have you answer that question.
Well, sure, Marcel. And you know, I think there is going to be a role for government in this process to provide to close the digital divide, because it is becoming a virtual utility like water or electricity. It is as important as either of those, and it, you know, as I mentioned before about the railroad industry of the late 1870s, government, or rather private industries, stepped in or reorganized them. Right now, the ISPs are struggling. You know, you look at their stock prices; they haven't changed in years. They're not making money. So, you know, if government were to, you know, for example, put out an RFP to provide citywide broadband internet, that would, you know, funded by the technology developers or other sources, but, you know, most likely the technology developers, that could, you know, not only close the digital divide, but really provide an essential service for the entire city. And it would attract other people, you know, other businesses to move to Long Beach to take advantage of free broadband internet. You know, I think it's going in that direction. And I might also add, you know, that the recent events in Washington, D.C. have shown that the internet companies are not capable of regulating themselves because, in my opinion, they fomented a lot of, or they made possible a lot of the protests and disruption. You know, so there is both a role for managing or regulating this industry and also providing it to those to the communities at large.
So internet service as a public utility.
Absolutely.
And that's being done in other parts of the country. And so something that we're watching and hopefully we can bring to Long Beach one day. That would be terrific. AJ, you've got your mic off. I think you're wanting to answer this question as somebody who's really close to it. What would you say?
Definitely, and in my opinion, it's going to have to be a really large collaboration across, you know, many different people. So it's going to involve government, definitely. It's going to involve, you know, the private sector, the internet service providers themselves, as well as nonprofits or community-based organizations. Really, it's going to have to be a full-on collaboration across the board, in my opinion, because it's going to have to, you know, it's going to take funds. So that's, you know, where a lot of the government, the philanthropy, all of that comes in, as well as the private sector. And then there's also a trust building that we're going to have to do to solve the digital divide. As Gwen mentioned originally at the beginning, there are currently people who don't access the internet out of you know trust, understanding of what it can provide, all of that. So there's going to have to be a role for community-based organizations to really kind of go that extra mile and build that trust with the community in order to access whether that's a competing device, the internet, even if it were as a utility.
Yeah, and Gwen, I think you can be accused of knowing too much. So could you sort of maybe give us your vision of what that looks like?
Yeah, I think there's a very simple way to solve the digital divide, and that's competition. And it's whether it's coming from the public sector, like Chris was articulating, whether it's a government-owned network or more corporate ISPs serving a particular area. that would bring prices down. So we said the number one barrier or determinant of whether somebody has broadband access in the United States is affordability. The prices we pay in the United States, compared to the speeds we're getting, are outrageous, and they're 10 times higher than in countries around the world. And that is because we have no competition. And if you're a Frontier subscriber and you're unhappy with the service, or you think you're paying too much, where are you going to go? You can go to Spectrum, but their prices are basically identical. So what incentive is there for the ISPs to lower their prices and to improve quality of service? Because they have a stronghold on the market. And so we need competition in this country. And again, that could come from a publicly owned network, or requiring the ISPs to lease their infrastructure, which we have subsidized as taxpayers and helped build. They would not have been able to deploy this infrastructure without subsidies from the government. So I think that it's completely justified to say that they need to open up the infrastructure and lease it at a reasonable rate to competitors in the market.
So reduce the price through competition. Stephen, what would you say?
I'd say it's going to be shared infrastructure and a partnership between the private and public sectors. Without that collaboration, and without us or companies like us who have a shared infrastructure model to reduce cost and reduce those barriers to entry, we'll need that collaboration. The permit streamlining that we talked about earlier, the cost to build the networks, and the ability to build the networks in a timely manner, given the demands that we're seeing today that already existed prior to COVID-19. We just really need to do it faster and better. And that's through a partnership with the community and the city.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to weigh in on this, DLBA or others? We've got a few minutes left here. There's one there's one question too that came up on Facebook, and it's talking about an app that was that City Council was researching, and it could be used by homeless service providers like MHA I mentioned earlier. By the way, my staff let me know that's 830 Atlantic Avenue is the location, 830 Atlantic Avenue in downtown Long Beach. Thank you, Stacy. So for homeless service providers like MHA, like Precious Lamb, and others, how do they share information? So if I'm a person suffering from homelessness, how do I find shelter, bed, food, services, and apparently there's going to be an app for that. And Gwen, you had said that a lot of folks in that situation do have access to a cell phone. So does anybody on this panel, maybe DLB, I know you work closely with the city, anybody aware of where that is in process? No? Okay. Well, I would suggest for the person asking the question, keep asking it, because if it's something that we're looking into, we should continue to do that. That's that whatever we can do to make it easier for people to find help and basic services is very, very important. So that's terrific. I'm going to close out with a very, very last question, and it's the concept of digital equity. So we kind of, I love that question of, if we could solve the problem, what would be the solution? But perhaps somebody on this panel can define what digital equity means, because equity is a big, not everybody understands what that means. And so I don't know if Morris or someone else could define what is digital equity, and then maybe we could tee it up from there.
Well, I think just briefly, if you think about equity versus equality, equity is equal outcome versus equality possibly as being equal income, people going into it. So, I mean, at least to the DLBA, I think a lot of other people, digital equity, as Chris said, is kind of equal access to participation. And then hopefully because of that, you're receiving an equal outcome, and you're reaping the benefits of digital access just as easily and just as justly as anyone else, regardless of your background.
Okay. Anybody on the panel want to comment on digital equity?
One thing I'd offer is just that it's about access and mobility. In order to have equity, I think anyone, anywhere, at any time should be able to access the digital networks, whatever form that comes in. It's a pretty simple equation. We need to lower the cost or barriers to entry in order to give all those people that we're talking about the access to those networks. And we know what the barriers are. We know how long it takes to build networks. So we just need to work collaboratively to find and facilitate ways to build them faster and better and cheaper, so that all the trickle down effects of reducing costs will, end up in the hands of, or end up in the form of services for the people that we're talking about, as well as the downtown business community. There's so many things that we can do today to make it much easier, and we just need to get out of our own way, I think.
I think mobility is a technical or a technology key to it, really. That is essential, because that's where the development will take place, really. Wired connections, they require access points. And, just wireless is really the future. And that'll serve the whole community, really, in my opinion.
That's great. And we are interested in your opinion. Anybody else for the good of the topic? I just want to say it's been a privilege speaking with all of you and engaging with the community in this way. This is a conversation that's been had for years, but really, I hope that the audience here today really understands what's going on in the background. It's people that are on this panel, people that are not on this panel, that are furiously trying to work to make things equitable, make things right in the community to get this resource, and really are passionate about it. And so thank you, Downtown Long Beach Associates, and thank you, Morris and Samantha, and the panelists. You all are just amazing people. Thank you for the work you're doing, and keep doing it, because there's a lot of folks that are depending on you.
It's a pleasure, Marcel. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for hosting the conversation.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you all from the Downtown Long Beach Alliance for joining us today. And thank you so much, especially to our panelists. I just wanted to say before we close that if you're interested in more downtown discussion events, they are held monthly. So if you just go to downtownlongbeach.org, look under virtual events, and you can sign up for future discussions. All right.
Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you. Everyone have a good day.
You too. Bye.